Welcome at the second video of the series How to Stay Mentally Healthy in a Crazy World. And this time we are going to talk about the theory. And before we do that, 3 points. The first point is that the theory is not absolutely necessary to put the lessons of staying mentally healthy into practice. It helps to understand why it works like it does, but it's not really necessary. So if you don't like theory or you simply are not able to understand the next video, then just skip it and don't worry about it. The second thing is that the theory will be presented in a nutshell. If you have the whole theory, we can talk about it for hours, and that would take too long, so it will be in a nutshell. And the third point is that while watching this video, you will wonder, what has this to do with staying mentally healthy? And we will come to that in the end of the video. Just stay tuned and you will get there. So let's start. We start with physics. 2 parts of physics, the particle wave experiment and the Big Bang. And we look at the results of these experiments for time and space. And if we have done that, we can create our model and we can construct a model that we will use for the practicing of staying mentally healthy. And that model will say something about mind and about connections, and we will talk about that, and we will end with a conclusion like we always will. First experiment in physics, the particle wave experiment. And it's all about 2 slits. And here you see the picture. On the left hand side you have a football player, on the right hand side you have 2 goals. And in between there's a wall. And in the wall there are 2 holes. And it's a very simple experiment. The football player kicks the ball and it ends up against the wall or through one hole or through the other hole. And you can measure the amount of balls that go through the wall by looking at how many balls are in the different goals. If in the experiment the football player kicks 100 balls, then about 20 will go to one hole and 20 will go to the other hole, and 60 of them will hit the wall and don't come into a goal at all. And that's a very simple situation. We can all understand that. It's impossible that the ball will go through both holes at the same time. That won't happen. The second way we can do this experiment is with a light. And if we use a light, then we know that the light will go to both holes. So if we put a screen on the other side and we turn on the light, then on the screen you will have a pattern of light and shades, and it will be like a wave. So the football player is the part and the light is the wave. And about 100 years ago, longer than that even, some physicists thought it's nice to know if you have a very, very small particle like an electron or a proton, to know if it's a particle or is it a wave. So they did the experiment with the 2 slits with a very, very small particle. And if they used a particle detector, it's like using the 2 goals, then they measured that it was the particles were in one detector or in the other one. So it was clear with that experiment with the particle detector that those small things were particles. They were parts. But they checked, so they also used a screen. And if they used the screen, then they saw a pattern. And that was really mind-blowing, because at the same time, with the same experiment, with the same part, it was behaving like a part and like a wave. And that behavior is completely different. It has a completely different result. So that's what we call duality. You have different realities, they are both true, and they're completely different. And that's really mind-blowing, because it's like something is A and B at the same time. And the first time I heard this, I couldn't believe it. And because the experiment has been repeated time over time over time over time, I just had to accept it. But it's still nearly impossible to understand it. You can accept it because the experiment can be repeated, and that's what physicists do. If they see that the experiment says it's A and B, they accept it. And that's the same thing as Einstein did. Because Einstein, when he heard about this for the first time, he couldn't believe it either. And he is very brilliant, so it's impossible to really understand it. But he accepted it because the experiment was repeated. So that's the way it works. Duality. The next thing is the Big Bang Theory. It's not an experiment because it's really happened. And the Big Bang Theory says that at the beginning of the universe there was a singularity. And in the singularity there was no time and no space. And at a certain moment, time and space began to exist, or however you can call it. And that was the birth of the universe. And in the birth of the universe, you can see that on the outside there is time and space, and there we have our stars and everything that's in it. And it's still growing. The universe is still growing, so it's still that time and space are expanding, in fact. And the other thing is that the singularity is also still there. Because a singularity, there's no time and space, so it can't disappear. It's still there. So that's another reality that's still there. And that reality is even more difficult to understand because there's no time and space. Our mind just can't grab that. But it's not less true, it's still there. And so we don't have only duality of particle and waves, we have plurality. So you have different realities at the same time that are completely different but all true. And if you think about time and space, that are the elements that are created, then you can say that time is equal to change, because if you don't change anything, there's no way of knowing that time is evolving. There's no time if there's no change. And the same does happen with space and difference. If there's no difference, in fact there's no space. It's like one big mist, and we are mist as well, then you can't divide one thing in another, so then space is just non-existent. But it's important to understand that time and space are constructions. And so it's not inevitable that there is time and space, because in the singularity, the beginning of the universe, there was no time and space. So there is a reality where there is no time and no space. But we live in a reality that we see but with time and space, and these are constructions. There are no illusions. Lots of Buddhists think we live in an illusionary world. No, it's a concrete, real world, but there are other realities. And that's important to realize. Then we go to the model. The model is that we have the singularity on the left-hand side with no time and no space, so no dimensions, 0 dimensions. And on the surface of the model, on the right-hand side, we have the physical world. There we have everything with an exact location and time. It's concrete, and we have the parts there. The football player is in the physical world. And between that, there's a whole space of a whole area of time and space going from 0 until the 4 dimensions that we have in our physical world. And if we go to the left from our physical world in 4 dimensions towards the singularity, everything becomes less concrete. Everything becomes less defined in space and time, because we have less dimensions. We have also less words to describe it, because our language is based on the physical world. So it will be less clear as well, but it will be just as real. And that's really very important to realize. is just as real as the physical world on the outside. All the realities going from the right-hand side to the left-hand side are completely real. And if you see this model, we can place all phenomena in there. Like the waves, they are still quite concrete, but not as concrete as parts, because you can't localize them exactly. We have something like energy, and the result of energy is very concrete, but the energy itself, it's very difficult to grab and to have it in time and space. So it's less dimensional, and so we can talk about lots of things, but the words will still, because we have less words, so we will have difficulties in describing the realities that are in deeper layers. But that's just the way it is. So what does that say about mind and connections and mentally healthy? And what we can say about that is that the mind is acting in our physical world. It needs space and time, because if you think about things, you think always in time and space. And our mind divides things. It says this is black, this is white, and this is left, this is right, this is above, this is beneath. And that makes everything very practical. I couldn't present this model without the mind, because I make difference between different things. And so the mind divides, the mind orders. And the A became before B and then C. And that's the way we think, in cause and effect. And the mind judges. And something is good or bad, it's black or white. It's all about dividing. It's all about, it's not one thing, it's all about taking them apart in time and in space. And that's how the mind functions. And the mind is probably the greatest thing that we have, because it makes it possible for us in the real world, in the surface world, to realize amazing things. It's great, and it's creative, it's perfect. So there's nothing wrong with the mind. It's important to realize that. But if you want to have our HAPOLs to stay mentally healthy, we have to find them in connections. And connections are different. They are in the deeper layer. They are free from time and space. Not completely, but more free than the mind. So the mind can't really understand the connections, because connections unify and they mix and they sense instead of think. So to have the right connections, to realize, to be conscious of them, then the mind won't help you. And there's nothing wrong with the mind, but you need more than that. So if you want to stay mentally healthy, you need your 4 HAPOLs, you need your connections, and those connections are in the deeper layers, and the connections are necessary, in fact, to guide your mind. Because if you leave your mind alone, then it will have difficulties to survive and to stay healthy. So you need the connections to have some guidance on the mind, and that's the way it works. And that's why the model is useful for understanding, to put things into practice. That was the theory. The conclusion. We have layered realities. And all those realities are very different, and they are all true at the same time. And the mind operates on the surface. The mind operates in a world where there's time and space, and where the mind divides and orders. But we need the connections as HAPOLs to stay mentally healthy. And they exist in deeper layers. So yes, the mind is great, and it's wonderful to have a big mind, but it needs guidance. And the guidance is with the connections that are in deeper layers. And if we know that, then we know how to stay mentally healthy. Thank you very much, and see you next time.